Hello. I want to talk about the best books and the worst books I read this year. Just want to get it out of the way. I am a little sick. I was traveling over Christmas, and I think my allergies kicked up because I was in a completely different place, or I did in fact catch something. I just feel a little gross, very stuffy. My voice does not usually sound like this, so I want to get that out of the way. Also want to state that I'm of the opinion reading wrap-ups should be done in January, not at any time in December, just because I read like 2 books in the last week of December, and they could have been a 5-star or a 1-star for me, and I wouldn't have been able to talk about them. So here I am in January talking about the worst books I read last year. Okay, we're gonna start off with the worst books I read, starting with the best of the worst. That is definitely Tender is the Flesh. I read this at the very beginning of December and I did not like it. I gave it, I think, a 1-star. Yeah, I gave it a 1-star. So first the plot. It's about it's a dystopian where people have like manufactured cannibalism. There's this like virus that, made everyone have to kill all the animals. And so now the only source of meat is people. And that created this entire like class system really, and like, all of that. And it's about this, I think he owns a manufacturing plant. And it's kind of just about him like going through this like section of life, I guess. Here's my review. I said that the characters had no depth, and once you got past the cannibalism aspect, there was nothing else left. The novella was boring, and there was a lack of interest in anything our main character did or any of the people he interacted with. I also felt like there were too many characters to the point where I couldn't quite keep the names straight, and I also could not stand the second half. If you know, you know. And I thought the ending was even worse. I think this would have been so much better as a short story. The author definitely still could have gotten all of her points about capitalism and society across in a shorter form. Because everything that she really had to say about capitalism was within the first couple of chapters, and then after that it was just kind of like filler, and it explored like other aspects, but they were so much more minor that I didn't really care about them. Like, I got the point. The point was made so quick that the rest of the book just was like filler. And I did not like the characters. The entire thing with like his dad dying was just like, I felt so unnecessary. I could not care about his relationship with his sister. And then again, like the entire second half was just so bad. I probably would have not finished it if it got worse much sooner, and if the book wasn't already so short. I kind of felt like there was no point in not finishing it. I understand why people really like it, but I just think that people only like it because it's like, gory, but the actual writing and allegory was just not great for me. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is Pure Color by Sheila Heidi, I think. Is that how you pronounce her name? Sheila? I don't know. I'm not sure. Anyway, I read this at the beginning of November and I did not like it. I can't really tell you the plot because it kind of didn't have any. The plot was about this like girl who works at this lamp shop and is going to school for like art things. I think she's like a writer maybe, and she meets this other character, and the other character is supposed to be this like mesmerizing and pivotal and like just I don't even know kind of person, but I can't even tell you what the plot was because the plot was not there, which surprisingly is my issue with the book. So for my review, I said this book was all style, very little actually being said. Could have heavily benefited from some workshopping on the actual idea and plot. Side note, one thing I hate in books is when the plot is non-existent and it's not there, and the point is just like, it's just an author getting their ideas across with like, and it's like thinly veiled. I hate it. Anyway, gun to my head, I could not tell you a single thing about Myra or Anna except that Myra works at a lamp shop. So yeah, that's our main character. She works at a lamp shop. None of the characters had any character, and there's no reason to care about the grief that Myra is going through because we know nothing about her father. I literally forgot that was an entire plot point, that she's going through grief. I forgot that. Maybe I missed some of the development with the characters because it was buried beneath unnecessarily flowery language. I could not give you a plot synopsis and because the plot was so non-existent. Oh, I forgot I have the book. There's like no plot synopsis when you look this book up. It's just, there's nothing there. There's not a lot of plot going on in this book, and I hate that. It literally says, here we are just living the first draft of creation, blah, 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 blah. In this first draft, here's the plot. In this first draft, a woman named Mira leaves home for school. There she meets Annie, whose tremendous power opens Mira's chest like a portal to what she doesn't know. When Mira is older, her beloved father dies and she enters a strange and dizzying dimension that true loss opens up. Pure Color tells the story of life from beginning to end. It is a galaxy of a novel, explosive, celestially bright, huge, and streaked with beauty. So she's a philosopher, which is fine, but you can tell because there's just no plot, and so much of it was just like, again, like overly flowery and complicated language. I did not like this book, which sucks because I think the cover is really fun. Like, this is such a beautiful shade of green. I love it. But I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. And I probably will forget about it in the near future. So, sorry, Pure Color. It was not a W for me. Okay, the next first book I read is definitely The Time Traveler's Wife. I 100% believe that this book only got popular because of like nepotism. I was looking into it because I just could not fathom why this book was like so huge and pivotal. So Audrey, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I don't even want to try. Our girl Audrey, her like brother or her husband or someone knew a big like talk show host, and so she was able to go on to this talk show and talk about her book. And I think that is literally the only reason why it became so popular, because I really hated this book so much. I 100% would have DNF'd it if it wasn't a part of my arbitrary list of books that I just should read, which is a whole different video. I will get there. Anyway, stay tuned to learn more about that. The Time Traveler's Wife, it follows this time traveler, and he kind of like unexpectedly time travels, and he doesn't always have the control of where he's going. He's able to, as he gets older, like hone his skill and not just like randomly pop out of time. But he doesn't have any control, which literally doesn't make sense for the plot, but whatever, we'll get there. Anyway, so he is like time traveling back and forth, and he ends up consistently going back to his wife, but it's like in different stages of her life. So the first time like the earliest time in like the timeline that he meets his wife, she's like 5. And one thing about the time travel in this book is that when he time travels, he loses his clothing. So he literally is a grown adult man meeting this 5-year-old naked, and it's like, okay, I guess we're not going to talk about that. So so that's how their romance forms, because he's just constantly like popping into her timeline and meeting her and forming a relationship with her. And that is like the basis of this book, is why I have such an issue with it. I thought it was really weird and gross that he was a grown man basically grooming his wife, because he goes back and he's like, I marry you, by the way, like right off the rip. So it's like she doesn't really have the ability to form her own like opinion about it, because she meets him when she is so young and impressionable. And like, I don't know, I could imagine if I was 5 and some random guy showed up and was like, I'm gonna marry you, by the way, that I would totally believe him and just like be like laser focused on that's the man I'm gonna marry, and that's what happens, and I hated that. It was so, the grooming was just weird. It felt like he was grooming her the entire book. The writing was so boring. It's a split POV, but like, I read a lot of reviews saying that it was really difficult to know who was talking, and like you could forget. I listened to the audiobook, and if I remember correctly, the audiobook had 2 different narrators, which helped, but otherwise they sound the exact same. It did not need to be a split POV, or if it did, like, please, Audrey, work better and write better. Anyway, so I really hated like the grooming aspect of it. I thought the plot was kind of lame already. I also hated every character. So he's like the son of rich musicians, and so he's like super rich, and he's just like so cultured, like just so cultured. And she's like the daughter of also rich people, so they're just like, they'll just like casually name drop and be like, oh yes, your home is very blah 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 architecture, dude, that no one knows about. Like, it was just, I hated it. The name dropping got so old so fast. Of like, it was like Audrey was just trying to prove that they were cultured by including every obscure artist that has ever existed. I hated this book. I thought it was so bad. I hate that I spent so much time on it, and I don't understand the hype. It's weird. He's weird and gross. I hated this book. Okay, the third worst book that I want to talk about is The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I hate Hemingway so much. Oh my god, I hate his writing, and I hate him. I think he's such a horrible person. Okay, so Hemingway. The Sun Also Rises. What is this book about? It's about a group of American friends, and they go over to Europe and they just drink. And there's like a plot point of he's also going to see bullfighting, and like that's fun. But I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I hate Hemingway so much. This is also the worst Hemingway I've read. I've read 3 of his other novels, and this is very much the worst. So one thing that I hate about Hemingway is how he writes. I hate how choppy his writing is. I hate his dialogue, because at times it'll just be 2 characters talking back and forth for like an entire page, and it can be so like confusing to read and like make sure you know who's talking, because it's just back and forth with like every 5th line will be like this person said, and it's not, it's so boring. And I understand that's how people talk, and that's like why he was revolutionary, because it's like, I understand why Hemingway is important, because he like revolutionized writing. He made it easier to read and more accessible. But like, oh my god, he also made it boring to read. None of his characters in this book are good people. They're boring, they're egotistical, they're just like rich and having fun and drinking, which is like very Hemingwaying. I could not tell you a characteristic about any of them, except for what's the one that no one likes? Robert Cohen, I think. The only reason why I even remember his name is because every other character in this book fucking hates that man and is like so mean to him. It's ridiculous. Oh my god, I hate this book. I wish I didn't read it. I hate Hemingway. You cannot convince me to read another Hemingway book. Don't even try. Like, I don't even know what else to say about it. I hated this man. I hate this book. The absolute worst book I read this year, and that is by far easily Endless Love by Scott Spencer. I hated this book so much. I made a 40-minute YouTube video complaining about it, in case you didn't watch that video, which you definitely should. But Endless Love, it's about this guy who is like in love with this girl and will basically go through like anything to be with her. It starts off with him lighting her house on fire, and then like him going to jail, him trying to get back with her, even though there's like a whole bunch of legal stuff in the way, and like he legally is not supposed to be within 10 feet of her, and yet here we are. Endless Love, it was pitched to me as a romance, and it was not. It was also horribly boring to read. It was really, really long. The main guy, David, he needs some serious mental health because he is like codependent, he's toxic, he literally stalks his girlfriend. He's so preachy and annoying to listen to, and the story is told from his point of view, and it's just like there's just like paragraphs of him just rambling about literally nothing. I do not understand why people enjoy the book because one, it's not romantic, and two, like I thought it was gonna be a steamy little smutty little book. The only actual sex scene in it was so disgusting. It was so disgusting. I wish I never read it at all because it was just so gross and bad and horrible. I hate this book so much. My heart rate is like getting up talking about this book because I just can't. I can't. That's another thing. The only sane characters in this book gets brutally killed off. Like he gets hit by a car not just once but twice. I never want to meet Scott Spencer because I just really question him as a person for writing this book. Oh my god, it was horrible. Horrible. By far the worst book I've ever read. I can't stop thinking about it. I hate it so much. Scott Spencer, you are on my hit list. Even more so than Hemingway. On to the best books I've read last year. Starting off very strong with Beloved by Toni Morrison. I read this at the very beginning of last year, so I honestly don't remember a ton of the plot, but I do remember I absolutely loved the writing. This is a book where, I don't know if all of Toni Morrison's books are like this, I've only read this one, but she does a really good job with the kind of train of thought writing that I believe it's William Faulkner started, or at least like popularized. Anyway, she does a really good job with it. It's very compelling. The characters are so interesting and compelling. I'm trying to even remember the plot. So it's about an escaped slave, and she's done like one of the worst things that you could possibly do, and so she lives with her daughter, and it's just kind of them going through their life. It's a big commentary on like the past and the present and like how relationships are built and how people are seen. And what I loved about this is that Sethe, the main character, the escaped slave, she is not ever like praised for her actions, but she's not overly condemned for them. She's just kind of a person, and I really loved that. Morrison is never like, yes, what she did was awesome, or like what she did wasn't. It's just kind of like, this is what she did and here's why. And I really liked that. It felt really similar to Wright's Native Son in that his action was also kind of just like seen as a breaking point as a Black person living in a white society. And I thought that this was really similar to that. And I really loved it. I loved the writing. I think it was just an amazing book, and I'm so happy I read it. That's like the worst of the best that I've read. The next best book that I read this year was The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I have grown up watching this movie. I don't even know how many times. It's one of those I can quote just about every other scene. I love the movie so much, and this book was so wonderful to read. It shows how good the movie did at adapting it. The only difference is between the movie and the book is how he did the nesting story. I understand why the movie did it in that way, and I think it still very much it holds true to the heart of the book. I love it. The only thing that I really hated about this book was the ending, and I think that's just because of this edition. I think because this is a newer edition, it has the epilogue, and I'm not a big epilogue person. Yeah, it had Buttercup's baby in it, and I felt like it kind of ruined how neatly everything was tied up in the book, so I didn't like that, but like I said, I'm pretty sure that's because of the edition I have. So, okay, The Princess Bride, what is it about? If you don't know, I don't know how you don't know. Go watch the movie, it's amazing. Anyway, so the book is about this guy whose dad had always read him this fairy tale, basically, and he goes and gives it to his son, and his son is like, this is the worst book I've ever read, and the dad's like, what do you mean? This is the best book ever. And then he goes and reads it for himself, and he's like, oh, my dad only ever read me the exciting parts. So then he goes and annotates it into a new book, leaving just the exciting parts. So the actual story is that book. It's such a good book. I love it so much. I love the movie so much. I am struggling to find things to even say other than I love it. But I love it. I love it so much. I highly suggest reading the book. You can skip Buttercup's Baby or whatever it's called, and you will not lose anything, and you won't gain anything. And you can watch the movie, and I'm very, like, you can watch the movie and never read the book, and you will still understand the book. So, love this. Love the movie. I'm so happy I finally read it. The next book I'd like to talk about is Cutting for Stone by Abraham Verghese. I really loved his writing in this book. I think that's really what sold the plot for me. I loved that every character felt so incredibly intentional. The settings felt intentional. The plots obviously felt intentional. And it was just such an intriguing book to read. And these characters and the setting felt so real. He writes with such an amazing attention to detail, and I loved it. I loved it so much. It's about these twins who their mom died in their birth, and then their dad kind of disappears right after. So they're raised by, it's not their like aunt and uncle, but it's like one of those family friend aunt and uncle kind of things. They're raised by them, and they both love medicine, and they just like grow as into adults in Ethiopia in a hospital. And I'm not doing the plot justice at all. It's such a good book. I listened to the audiobook and I absolutely loved it. And it's just, like I said, every character felt intentional. Their motives felt intentional. The plot and the setting felt just so thought out. I loved it. It was beautiful to read. The ending was so sad, but it's so amazing. I cannot recommend this book enough. Please go read Cutting for Stone by Abraham Verghese. Can't recommend it enough. The second to last book I want to talk about today of the best books that I read and the worst is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I just want to start out by saying that if you are like in the depths and despair of depression, I might skip this one. Personally for me, I think if I had read this when I was super depressed and had a lot of anxiety, it would have not been the best for me. So I just want to kind of put that out there. But The Bell Jar, it's really good. So it's about this girl who we can assume is kind of a stand-in for Miss Plath herself. She's a new young adult. She's out in the world. She's going to college, I think. And she's just kind of trying to find herself, and she feels very lost in the world, which I think is something that a lot of young women can relate to, and I mean young boys too. But she feels very lost in like what she's supposed to do with her life, and she ends up going into a mental institution for a while, and it's very much a roller coaster of like, we start where she's kind of in the middle mentally, and then we follow as she kind of goes down and comes back up, and it ends in an even higher place than it started. And I just think her writing was really beautiful. It's such a good representation of being depressed and mental health. In the book, there's like no one thing that you can point to for why she's depressed. It's not like she lost a family member, she had something horrifically tragic happen to her. There's nothing like that. She's just in a funk, and I think Sylvia did a really good job at painting that, and it was just very relatable to read. It reminded me a lot of like, there were things that she wrote about that reminded me of how I felt when I was also in not a great spot. It ends in a good note. It ends in a good place, and I think that is important. It's such a good book. Like I said, if you're struggling, maybe wait to read it. But if you're in a more stable place, I think that this is an amazing book to read. I really did enjoy this. And we'll probably reread it multiple times. So thank you, Miss Plath. There's a reason why it's so highly acclaimed. Okay, the absolute best book I read this year, by far, hands down, oh my gosh, was Grey Dog by Elliot Gish. I'm fiending for Miss Gish to write more. Such an amazing debut novel. I annotated the crap out of it, actually, low-key. I wanted to get into annotating this year, and it hasn't totally stuck, but this one I definitely appreciated. So it is about a teacher in 1901, and she is a bit of a spinster because she's not married. She's, I think, 25 or like 26, so like it's very normal in our time not to be married like that, but in 1900 it was a bit more frowned upon. Anyway, so she accepts a teaching position in this little village, and immediately things are like not quite right. There's this kind of divide about people cross the bridge and like which side of town and all of that. And as she goes about meeting her students and meeting people in the town, this like horror unfolds, and it was such an amazing book. I loved the repetition that Gish had. There was quite a few times where like the same phrase was repeated, but as the book went on, that phrase changed its like depth and meaning. It is a little sapphic, which I thought was super fun, especially because I wasn't expecting that, and it was just, oh my gosh, it was beautiful. Gish's writing was beautiful. Her characters were amazing. Everything, I know I keep saying this, but everything felt so intentional. I loved, there were so many layers to it. I could go on about this book for literal days. The horror was so unnerving, and the atmosphere was so unnerving, and some of the quotes were just so interesting. And then there was also a lot of like that some feminism takes in there as well, and the ending was just horrific, and I loved it, and it was so unexpected. I loved it. There's some like generational trauma with it, because her father is like a POS. So I read the ebook and then immediately went out and bought it, and I feel like I'm not even singing its praises enough, but it was such a mesmerizing and capturing book. The characters were amazing, the plot was amazing, the atmosphere was amazing. If you're looking for like a good horror book, I 100% suggest that you pick this up. It was so good. I absolutely loved it, and I like kind of can't stop talking about it, and I can't stop thinking about it, and I'm already itching to reread it because it's just that good. Gish did such a good job with her characters, the plot, her writing especially, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait for Elliot Gish to publish another book, because this one was just amazing, and I absolutely loved it, and it's 100% the best book I've read this year. If I could rate it more than 5 out of 5 stars, I 100% would. It's a 10 out of 5. I love this book. I cannot tell you a single thing I did not like about this book. Okay, hello. It's been a couple days, but I thought that I should also put the books that I DNF'd at the end of this video, just because I did read part of them, even if I didn't read all of them. I only DNF'd 2 books this year. My New Year's resolution is to DNF more books, because there were a lot of books that I read this year that I definitely should have just put down and said no thanks, and I was angry that I spent so much time reading them by the time I was done with them. So that's my New Year's resolution, but as of last year, I only DNF'd 2 books, and I think that they're both 2 pretty controversial books to have not finished and hated. So I'm going to start with perhaps the less controversial, and that is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand. I honestly am not sure how to pronounce her name. I think she's kind of pretentious for it anyway, because that's not her actual name. I listened to the audiobook, and I think I was maybe like 5 hours through it, which the audiobook itself was like 48 hours long, so it wasn't an insignificant amount that I had worked through. I think I got to like maybe the 20-25% mark when I decided that I was not going to put any more time into this book. I think that this would have been much better as just like a big long essay explaining Rand's point of view and philosophies. I didn't really care about the characters. I didn't care about their wealth. I didn't care about the trains. I did not care, and it was taking so long to get any momentum going. Oh my gosh, I just look how small this print is. Like, I'm sorry, did it really need to be this long? Did it really need to be 1,000 pages of the smallest print you've ever seen? No. So I don't know, the characters weren't building, the plot wasn't building, nothing was building for me. I did not care about the characters, and I was not looking forward to ever listening to my podcast or my audiobook. So I DNF'd this, and it was awful. I really did not recommend it. The second book I DNF'd this year, I think is a little less controversial, actually, at least in a 2020s lens, and that was On the Road. I got, I think, about 40% of the way through the audiobook before I decided that I was kind of done listening to it. Basically, the book is like, okay, we get it. You're a beatnik and you think the world is your oyster. Like, that's the entire book, at least the part that I got through. It was just so like, I'm young and life is good and no one can stop me. I'm going to hitchhike across the United States and just have fun. And that was it. I could not tell you a single important thing about our stand-in for Mr. Jack. I don't even remember his name. Literally, what was the main guy's name even? It doesn't matter. But I could not tell you a single important thing about him. I could not tell you a single important thing about Dean or Sal or any of the characters he met. And I just thought it just wasn't for me. It's one of those books where, like, I understand why it was so monumental when it came out. But I think if it had come out in the year of our Lord, 2025, and had that much, like, hype, people like, it'd be a red flag. I genuinely think that incels would, like, pick up this book. Maybe not incels, but, like, that kind of internet person would pick up this book and just, like, make it their entire personality, because it's just like, oh, I deserve everything in the world, you know? And that really put me off of the book. I was like, this is kind of gross. Maybe if I had read this when it came out, which unfortunately I don't think I would have been able to, considering I was born in 2000. Anyway, I think then I would have appreciated it more maybe, but in 2024 when I read it, it was not doing it for me, so I stopped reading it. But that is the 5 worst and the 5 best books that I've read this year. Let me know if you have any controversial opinions, or if my opinions are super controversial. Have you read these books? What did you think about them? Which was your favorite book that I talked about? Which was your least favorite? Are you going to read The Princess Bride, or at least watch the movie? Let me know. That's really all I have for today. Like I said, I think that it's better to do a reading wrap-up in January than December. So sorry, it makes more sense. You can't wrap up the year while you're still in it. What is this? Spotify Wrapped? Sorry. Anyway, I hope you guys had a wonderful holiday season. I hope you had a wonderful new year and you are going into 2025 with just the best vibes, and I hope nothing but the best for all of you. So until next time, peace and love.